Attention, everybody. Come on, say it. Hold on. Change, change, try again. As a true Dominican, I really think we could make it. But as a people, we have to learn to commit. Journey ahead will never be smooth and sweet. But as an ambitious nation, we have to be upbeat. I know we have done it before, so we can do it again. All the pain we've endured, but pride we have to maintain in order to create a better world. Every living soul has to play their role. We have an opportunity to change things around, an opportunity to change things, an opportunity to make Dominica strong. We have an opportunity to change things around, an opportunity to change things, an opportunity to make Dominica strong. We got to stamp out the devil, stamp out all evil, jealousy, not by me, certainly. We got to stamp out greediness, stamp out wickedness, jealousy, not by me, certainly. Tomorrow is the first day, the rest of our lives. Let's make tomorrow the first day of the rest of our life. We have an opportunity to change things around, an opportunity to change things, an opportunity to make our country strong. Whoa. Change, change. Whoa. Whoa. I remember the love and unity that we once shared. Starting from the home, the children would be prepared. Goodness was a daily part of our living. This society would be part of our children upbringing. We used to eat everything we grow and grow everything we eat. But smiling faces would glow and our people were real discreet. We need to go back to where we were. Otherwise we'll witness things we never seen before. We have an opportunity to change things around, an opportunity to change things, an opportunity to make Dominica strong. We have an opportunity to change things around, an opportunity to change things, an opportunity to make Dominica strong. We got to stamp out the ugly, stamp out cruelty, jealousy, not by we, certainly. We got to fight hypocrisy, all conspiracy, jealousy, not by we, certainly. Tomorrow is the first day, the rest of our lives. Let's make tomorrow the first day of the rest of our lives. We have an opportunity.
All right, yes, indeed. We really have an opportunity to change things around in Dominica for the better. Folks, yes, good evening. It's 5 minutes past the hour of 6 o'clock in Dominica and the rest of our Eastern Caribbean region. Welcome on board to that space. That is a Civic Vibe space right here in Dominica. We are producing this program and it is streamed live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, so that those of you who always log on, that is the time that you need to be around that information/education table. Already the day, it's the 11th of August, 2024, and that is where we're about to make a very prompt start in just a bit with our guests here in just a while. So yes, those of you who are here already, what I ask of you is that please share that live information, make someone know that your favorite, their favorite program is on. That is the Civic Vibes program that is aired each and every Sunday from 6 o'clock indeed. Let me just make an apology straight up for Mr. Alvin Thomas, the host of the program, who will not, unfortunately, be here with us tonight. Alvin is engaged in some other business. So my brother Alvin Thomas, a special good evening to you, you and your family out there. Please do enjoy what you guys are enjoying at this time. We miss you for sure on the program, but we know when duty call, then a man got to do what he got to do. Yes, so Alvin Thomas will not be here with us, but will be there in spirit nonetheless, indeed. Folks, it is, as I said, it is already 6 minutes now, moving down past the hour of 6 o'clock, and a very, very interesting program, informative one of that awaits us all. So I ask you at this time, please make yourself feel very, very comfortable wherever you are, and just be in tune. Lend us your eyes, lend us your ears this evening for just about an hour, 45 minutes thereabout. And our guest, Senator Mr. Delbert Paris, brother from the Marigot constituency, he will be talking to us as our guest this evening on a very, very important topic about the role of Dominicans, yes, in the development of our country, Dominica. So that is the topic under the microscope for, exploration here this evening, the role of us in Dominica as Dominicans as we continue or as we forge ahead to try to develop our country, Dominica. So without much more delay, let me just move across and say a hi and hello to brother Senator Delbert Paris. Good afternoon to you, my brother, and welcome to the Civic Vibes Forum for the first time. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Lofty. Thank you so much for the invitation. It is indeed a pleasure to be here to have another opportunity to share with my brothers and sisters in Dominica and, of course, in the diaspora as well on development issues in Dominica and how we should be playing a bigger role. So thanks for having me here. Looking forward to a good program.
Yes, indeed. Looking forward to indeed a good program indeed. Senator, as we move, let me just ask you about life being a senator of late. How has that been going, brother?
Interesting. It is a learning curve. There's a lot to learn and there's a lot of value to receive and a lot of value to add. I was surprised at a lot of the things that I encountered in the initial stages, but it has been good. It has been good. Most importantly, being able to have a voice for people who don't have a voice and being able to shed light on things, particularly in the parliament, on things people would much rather ignore and not spend too much time discussing about. I think that is the biggest responsibility of people, particularly on the opposition side, to bring a certain level of balance to the discussion and to ensure that we're raising the issues that affect the lives of people. That has been the most satisfactory. Difficult road, but the one that's worth it.
Indeed. Brother Delbert Paris, thank you very much indeed for your opening salvo here, as it were. Folks, let me just give you guys an idea of the sacrifice that this brother is making. I made contact with him through the week, and off the bat, he said, Brother Lofty, whatever it is, Dominicans, I am there with them, and if it's information to be dispensed to them, then I will. And so he's here with us this afternoon in the flesh, that is. Have other commitments, but he decided to, spare some time with us here to sort of elaborate on some of the issues that he has been discussing with Dominicans by and large. So, Brother Delbert Paris, we thank you very much for your time indeed.
Absolutely.
Yes, indeed. We know once we are on social media, then basically we are global. And I know there are many, many people who at this time may be seeing you, hearing you, and not know who is Delbert Paris. Can you just, shed some light? Just who is Delbert Paris?
Interesting. Delbert Paris, a young man from the community of Marigot. My background is in construction. Not sure if many people know this, but my father is Stuart Paris. And those of you who are familiar with Stuart Paris, that's what he's done for his entire life. I'm the only boy in 4 children. I have 3 older sisters. And I learned construction and volunteerism from my dad.
So I can see you're the baby boy in the family.
I am the baby boy. I am the baby boy, and unfortunately, my sisters will always see me that way. I don't have a choice in the matter. But I learned the ropes in construction and volunteerism from my father, always being available to serve the community and give back whatever you have. My parents and our family comes from humble beginnings. it would take the entire program plus to tell you their story and the values that they were able to hand down to me as a young man. And that part of my upbringing is what has propelled me to always work harder, but always make myself available to serve the greater good, and that is people. Always making myself available to make sure that I can, in whatever way possible, to be an asset.
Yeah, indeed, indeed. And talking about your father, I don't know your father that well, but the little that I know, the little engagement that I had with him already, I can vouch for basically all of what you said, in that he's a very hard worker, you know, a community man, a man that you can depend on. His word is his bond, as it were.
For sure.
And so, having said all that, you know, and more, then I know you came from good roots, and you will continue in your father's stead.
I'll do my best, for sure.
Sure, sure.
Do my best.
Anybody of note, anybody of interest you'd want to just give a shout out before we actually, you know, get into
The community of Marigot, the community that raised me. There's a lot of people. I don't want to miss anybody, so I won't go down the list, but the community of Marigot and Dominica at large. I was raised by a community of hardworking people, and I always find myself, I'm always lucky to be in the presence of my elders, senior people who have always looked out for me and always challenged me to be the best version of myself. So I want to say good night to the people of Concord and Marigot, and to the wider Dominican public that I am so fortunate to be from and now to have the opportunity to serve.
Yes, indeed. All right. Thank you very much, much of you. And so we are much more warmed up to just who now is a Mr. Delbert Paris from the Marigot area, indeed. Delbert, let me just tell you straight off the bat that I used to listen to Parliament before. I used to. Ardent supporter, ardent listener.
Right.
But of late, basically what it has dovetailed into, what it has become, I must say honestly that I have sort of, you know, reneged on that sort of decision to listen to Parliament. That is where my country's affairs supposed to be discussed at the very highest level. And so decisions that are taken there affect all of us in the country.
Absolutely.
But, you know, things that are coming out from there now, it seems not like how it used to be before. And so I sort of take a back seat, as it were. But having listened to you, you being a senator in Parliament now, and in terms of your deliveries, I must say that every time I have the opportunity, I must tune into your contribution, and of late the final contribution that you made to Dominicans in terms of your representation. I want to publicly put on record that I recognize the effort, I recognize the research, the hard work that went into it, and your delivery. And so I reached out to you and basically complimented you on that effort. And is in that vein now that I said, you know something, let me see if I can try to get Mr. Paris back on here, so that at least those who did not hear, those who did not know, those who did not have an idea of, you know, what he said there, they could maybe get a sneak peek as to some of the things that he went into in Parliament. So, you know, Paris, I want to say, I congratulate you, and with persons like you there, then Dominica for sure is in good hands. So again, keep up the good work. And I'm always looking forward to your deliberation, and I can speak for some other people as well.
Thank you very much, Lofty. Like you rightfully mentioned, it is a lot of work. And as you know, the structure of the parliamentary opposition right now is independent. So we don't have a party behind us with a constitution and a list of rules and a modus operandi that would get us prepared for Parliament. I would like to let you know that we do have a few people that reach out to us, and a few resource people that we can lean on to gain some information and some support as it relates to parliamentary business. We do have some support, but that does not minimize the amount of work that it takes to get ready. We don't have PSs and secretaries and financial unit that is able to, you know, write our speeches for us and give us going into Parliament. So you'd understand that it takes a bit of effort and sacrifice getting ready to to present at the highest level in the highest court. In addition to that, we only have half an hour, most of us, and that is not enough time. That is not enough time, and I'm sure that you've probably had the chance to see a few of the other sittings where we requested more time, and that was voted down. So it's not likely that we will be given additional time to sort of deliberate in the House. So yeah, it's an uphill battle. Takes a lot of work, but it's absolutely worth it because you can get the message out there, bring a certain level of balance to the conversation, and help to do the people's business.
Yeah, indeed. All right, folks, just before we get back to, thank you, Brother Paris. Just before we get back to Brother Paris, for us to start that conversation, read the role that Dominican ought to be playing in our country's development. Sometime later, about the 7 o'clock mark, when we open up those lines, the numbers that you can call into the program, they are 615-9470 and also 245-2396. I'll be plugging those information in the feed, the live feed, so just in case you did not catch it. But yes, we are live at this time, and we're talking to Senator Delbert Paris out of the Marigot constituency. Mr. Paris, in terms of the topic under scrutiny this evening about Dominican's role in our nation's development, where and how would you, sort of get us going, sir?
Luffy, what I want to do, I'm sure you would know as well, because I did see you there. I had the opportunity to participate in the Economic Revival Summit that was held at Jungle Bay a few months ago. And there were some things, part of my presentation, that I was able to set up what our public sector investment program should be looking like. I'd like to start there in terms of giving the listeners and the viewers an idea as to what we should be expecting from our governance system as it relates to investing in the public sector. And that I will use as a precursor to go into what we've seen in the evaluation of our recent budget approval process. I think it would give us an idea as to what we should be expecting. And we ourselves now, the listeners, can deduce where we are in terms of our development process as a country. It is not to say that nothing is happening, but it's also to look behind the veil of what you see and what we should be expecting and how we ourselves as people in a country should be expected to participate. It is not possible for us to go through every single aspect of the development process and of all the different sectors. That'll take too long, and it will be too much just for the two of us to discuss. We'll have to take maybe a few months to discuss that. But we can do a bit of an overview and sort of get people into the frame of mind as to where we fit into our development process and where we should fit and where we have a space for participation, and we ourselves can deduce if that's what is right. I'll also go through a few recommendations. I like to share the recommendations with the general public because I think they can gain something from it. The government doesn't want recommendations. So, and 25 years down the road, if they don't know this, it says something about whether they're the right people for the job. If you don't know that this is what you should be doing 25 years, then you're probably not the person for the job, and you should make the way clear so that others who have the idea and others who have the real discernment to do this kind of development for the future of Dominica should get involved and put themselves forward for doing it. So that's how I like to take the conversation. Obviously, I hope it's a back and forth and not just a monotonous thing, and maybe your callers can chime in and we can have a nice little discussion going forward.
Sure. There will be this sort of dialogue between you and I based
Absolutely.
on things that we'll be discussing. Yes, go right ahead.
Absolutely. Yeah, so that's what I'd like to do, and you let me know when I can go.
Okay, sure. Yeah, you could go right ahead. Let me just, there are some persons on the live feed. Let me just see if I could touch some of them. Jesse Villa there, good evening to you. Marvin Sheldon Boland, I Dominic, Gadia Deluge, Dorian Dorival, Maslin Edwards, good evening. Teresa Susanna Rule, Eliza Louis Gom, Ziska, Sarah Rosa, Robinson, Stephanie John Baptist, Dave Bertrand, Patricia Fontaine, Jesse James, Lennox Linton, you're listening and watching as well. Good evening to you folks and all the other people on the live at this time. Yes, brother Paris, go right on.
So Lofty, let's go back a few months and talk about touch on a little bit what we discussed at the economic summit. We looked at the public sector investment policy, what it should look like. Now, public sector investment policy is not the entire governance system. It's one part of the governance system that is responsible for the growth in the economy. It's responsible for the growth in the economy. And it should provide sort of a structured approach for allocating funds to projects that should promote economic growth, social welfare, and particularly sustainable development. But a public sector investment program or public sector investment policy does not operate in a vacuum. There are a number of guiding principles upon which a public sector investment policy should be developed. And one of those, I'll go through a few of them. The first one is sustainability. Your public sector investment policy should be one that embodies sustainability. That is, ensuring that the investment that we're about to make or the investment that we continuously make, it promotes environmental sustainability. It provides long-term economic growth. It should be one that embodies equity, ensuring fair distribution of investment benefits across the different regions within your locality and among the local citizens and the population. It should promote transparency or embody transparency, meaning that it should maintain transparency in decision-making processes and in the investment allocations. One of the guiding principles is efficiency. Your public sector investment policy must optimize the use of public funds to achieve the highest possible return on the investment. And as I'm going lofty, we can see where these things, and we can already start to pinpoint gaps that exist within our own public sector investment policy or the implementation of the investment policy. Another guiding principle upon which your public sector investment policy should be based is accountability. It should establish clear accountability mechanisms for the management of outcomes and the investment that you're making with the resources of the citizens of your country, in this case, in Dominica. We have some sub-sectors within those guiding principles where you break them out. That goes into investment prioritization. How are we investing these public funds and where are we investing them? And are we prioritizing where these funds are needed most? You need to conduct a needs assessment that prioritizes the projects based on where you're expected the highest economic and social impact. Budgeting and funding speaks for itself. Implementation and management. We'll talk about budgeting and funding in a while when we start talking about the budget allocations and how those things, how the review went in the last couple of weeks. Implementation and management, you need to implement a transparent and fair contracting and procurement process. We'll talk about that for a little bit too. Ensuring value for money in order to in an event or in an effort to prevent a rise in corruption. Monitoring and evaluation, lofty, something that we don't see a lot of or we don't hear a lot of, but monitoring and evaluation is important. Establish an evaluation framework to assess the effectiveness of those investments. How effective is this investment? Okay, we put this amount of money down here. We've been throwing money at this wall. How effective is this? Is this reaching the goal? Is this achieving the expected outcomes that we're intending to accomplish? Transparency and accountability, audits and reviews. Lofty, I don't know if you know anything about the Dominica's audit department and how efficiently it is functioning, but it's something worth looking into because that audit department helps to put a lot of things in perspective for us. And we don't hear a lot coming from that audit department. Obviously, there are things that they can't put out, but obviously there's things that we should be hearing from our audit department. There's a sort of symbiotic relationship that the audit department should have with the public service. And I'm not sure that that link is being made effectively as it should. A grievance mechanism. is part of the structure of a public sector investment policy, a grievance mechanism that is establishing a way for people to express or to address grievances and complaints relating to the investment of projects. We'll talk about that when we talk about the impact, the environmental impact that some of these public sector investment programs in Dominica are having on the people who live in those communities. What are those impacts, and what is the grievance mechanism that is set up to ensure that people can have those issues addressed? Capacity building, and of course, your public sector investment program is supposed to be something, your policy rather, is supposed to be something that is alive. It needs to be reviewed constantly and continuously updated. So Lofty, the first challenge that we have in Dominica is that our public sector investment policy is devoid of a holistic national development interest. And it does not really adhere to these set of guidelines that I just outlined to you. And it needs to be revisited. It needs to be revisited. One of the challenges or the natural occurrences is that our legislative framework will follow your public sector investment policy. Your legislative framework is going to follow your public sector investment policy. And I will use an example. The Public Procurement and Contract Administration Act that you've probably heard about in 2021 and that was repealed, and the one from 2012 rather. So in 2021, the Public Procurement and Contract Administration Act was repealed and replaced with a new Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Property Act. Now, there was a consultation that was led by the then Builders and Contractors Association in Dominica in 2021. What they did was outline a number of challenges that they had with the implementation of the new bill and the inefficiencies that it would have. Now, we can go through that. Lofty, I can make that document available to you.
Yeah.
But it would take another 4 programs just for us to break it down. Now, even after that bill was passed in December of 2020, of the same year, 2021, the builders and contractors came back again. And what they did was review the pronouncements that they made and the pronouncements made in the parliament. And they had then even more concerns about the implementation of this Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Property Act. I want to read to you a quote from the document that they released back in 2021. It says that repealing the Public Procurement and Contract Administrations Act number 11 of 2012 and replacing it with the Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Property Bill would fail to achieve the purpose of the act passed in 2012. It would fail in a way that associated with the value for money or the exchange for value for money, transparency, broad participation, fairness and equity, accountability, and clarity of procurement events. It would fail to foster public confidence in the procurement process. It will fail to increase the economy and facilitate real domestic growth and limit money that would be going into the underground economy. It will fail to provide tangible evidence that safeguards are effective in dealing efficiently with the offenses and civil liberties. And importantly, it would depress economic growth, development of the private sector, and put to slumber the entrepreneurial spirit of the youth. Not if we take a bird's eye view, just a bird's eye view, not even in detail. Yeah. If we take a look at Dominica's public investment program now, particularly in the areas of procurement, the builders and contractors were right back in 2021. We're now in the middle of 2024, and everything that they have said has come to pass. We've seen the depressing of our economic growth. We've seen the entrepreneurial spirit of the young people disappearing. We've seen the collapse of the middle class. We've seen the disappearing and the struggle of the private sector. And I'm not sure that our policy and our legislative framework allows us to improve on that. And it is shown in the way we are approving money within our public sector investment program in Dominica at this time. That
You
is the
say
problem that
you
we
say
have.
you don't think the present act allows for improvement?
No, it doesn't. Because the legislative framework allows the government, or allows the administration to conduct public procurement events that they don't have to be transparent about. They don't have to be transparent about. Look at our major investment projects around the island. The schools that are currently being constructed, the international airport, geothermal plant, the Dominica Grammar School, and a number of other large procurement events. A lot of those things, we don't know what procurement process was used. We didn't see a public tender. We don't know. And we don't know if there was a way for local participation or even a conglomerate to come forward and participate in an open, transparent procurement process. And that is a problem with our public sector investment program as it relates to procurement. And what that does, Lofty, and I'll show you in a minute in the budget allocations, what that does is put us in a position where we're not sure that we're getting value for the money that we're exchanging. That is what that type of procurement activity is what puts us in a place where we're not sure that we're getting value for money. We might be overpaying tremendous amounts for works that we should not be overpaying for as it relates to our public sector investment program.
Yeah, Mr. Paris, you have been speaking there and I've been listening and quite informative indeed. Let me just go back a bit to ask you to sort of exactly all what you said there. Give the average Dominican the benefit of the doubt in that. Tell them, for example, why is it that such policy, once implemented properly, will work or should be working for their benefit?
The way it works, Lofty, a transparent or holistic development program, particularly in the area of investment, when that works well in an ethical, sustainable way,
yes,
it gives us an opportunity for all Dominicans to grow. Because we talked about transparency, we talked about capacity building, we talked about the accountability, we talked about the monitoring and evaluation, and we talked about the equity. Those things, when those things are implemented properly in a holistic manner, what that does is widen the net for economic growth for everyone. I'll give you an example. With that type of sustainability, it ensures, one, that we're getting value for money. I remember a case that a situation back, I can't remember the year, was it 2012? I think it was the same year. But remember when we built that West Bridge, I think there was a company called NSG. I think the builders and contractors ended up in court with the government.
Yes, I do remember, yes.
They challenged the issuing of the contract to that company. And the biggest challenge was, one, it was not a transparent procurement event. Enough was not done to make it transparent and allow for open, local, transparent involvement. And one of the biggest reasons that they pushed the case forward is that you guys are paying way too much for that construction. I think it was costing over $6 million more than what they said it should have cost. A transparent, ethical, sustainable investment policy ensures that the government is not spending more money than it needs to in any one procurement event. It ensures that you're getting value in exchange for the money that you're spending. And that way, Lofty, when we have more money available to us, it means that we can take care of all of our social services, like our healthcare. It means that we can spend more money in the area of youth and sports. And we don't get to use the excuse of lack of funds when it comes to not spending money, particularly in our productive sectors. It means that we'll have more money available to spend on the development of the individual and to build local capacity in the ordinary Dominican and also to take care of the people who are less fortunate and who are vulnerable among us, because we'll always have those people. But they should never suffer because we're spending money badly, because we're not using transparent processes as it relates to procurement.
So basically what I'm hearing you saying, Mr. Paris, is that whatever happens at the top, there's a short trickle-down effect as to whether what's done properly on the top, it will be derived in the bottom, or vice versa.
Absolutely. 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 It definitely works that way, because you're looking at resources, and the equitable use of resources, the sustainable use of resources will affect every connecting industry, will affect every interconnected and cross-cutting sector.
Yeah.
And if we're using one badly, it's going to strain the rest of them. And it goes back to policy. It goes back to our policy, the implementation of those policies, and the legislative framework that we put around them, in ensuring that we have holistic and sustainable development across the country for everybody involved.
Yeah. You mentioned as some of the core principles of that policy should be, among others, accountability and transparency. Can you just expound a little bit there?
Accountability and transparency. Well, of course. If you let's look at the budget debate that we just had. And in my presentation in the budget debate, it was a bit frustrating for me, and it always is, because you don't hear any of the ministers involved going through a transparent performance review as to what happened with the allocations that we had last year. Where did we have challenges? Where did we have triumphs? And what are we prepared to do to ensure that we mitigate those challenges going forward? And we see it over and over again. There's a trend in all of the productive sectors as it relates to implementation. Having a transparent and accountable framework as our guiding principle in our development structure and in our public sector investment structure ensures that our ministers and our ministries and all our accounting officers are transparent and accountable for the responsibilities as they have, especially as it relates to the implementation of public procurement events and our public sector investment framework. That allows for greater handling and more efficient and sustainable handling. If I'm not being held accountable, Lofty, there's no reason for me to be doing my job well. There's no reason for me to ensure that things are done in the way that they're supposed to be, because I don't answer to anybody. Nobody's holding me accountable. I can come and I can stand up and I can say a lot of flowery things that don't amount to anything, because I don't have to respect and adhere to checks and balances. And that's what we see happening in our governance structure. And it should stop, because it is unfair to the people of Dominica, because what we're hearing and what we're seeing on the ground does not match up. And it's because there's a gap. There's an accountability gap that exists. Someone is not being accountable, and the people of Dominica are paying the price for it.
Yeah, so in terms of checks and balances now, who or what or officers in terms of offices as well, can you pinpoint to some of them who may be able to hold these people responsible?
But the first one is the audit department. That would be my first go-to. The audit department is the organization, an independent organization that is responsible for going through our governance system, particularly in our public service, with a fine-tooth comb to ensure that we're adhering to the implementation and to the performance according to law. But it has to be funded. The information must reach the audit department, and they have to be given access to do their work. If you can pull up the audit department report now, the one of last year, and one of the things that you will see going through right through the audit report is that they asked for information and they couldn't get it. They asked for information and they couldn't get it. They asked for information and they couldn't get it. That is a problem, because if the audit department is not able to audit, then we don't know what is happening. Nobody's being held accountable.
True.
So that would be my first go-to. The audit department has to be able to say, yes, this was done right. Yes, this was implemented correctly. Yes, everybody that was paid the right amount of money. This process went as it was sold to the administration, and they can sign off on certain things and they can raise questions. And once questions are raised, then the relevant authority needs to take it up. They need to take it up and find out, hey, why didn't this happen? Why aren't we doing this? And then somebody needs to be held accountable because the laws are in place for that to happen. But the officers has to be responsible and the process has to be followed. And if there's a bottleneck, it needs to be relieved.
So I'm getting from you, Brother Paris, that there are a number of projects happening in Dominica, what's happened in Dominica, and very little transparency, or very little in terms of accountability went into some of these projects. And so the Dominican public now are at the shorter end of the stick in terms of value for money.
Even before we get to the yeah, for sure. But even before we get to that, there's an issue with I have personally with the participation and level of implementation, the way in which it is done. Right? The way in which it is done. I'll give you an example that I used during my presentation at the recent budget debate. Let's look at the airport project for a second. All right. The largest capital project that Dominica has done in its lifetime, and probably will be the largest for some time to come, right? But what is the level of local participation there? If we're looking at the guiding principles that should be used to develop a public sector investment program, if we're looking at those things, where is the equity? What are we using to ensure that we're having a fair distribution of the benefits across the population? One of the examples that I chose to use was using our truckers, for example, right? We're going to be spending $1.6 billion of Dominica's money. Now, remember, it was promoted that this is not a loan. This is not a grant. This is a front-loading thing, something that we still are yet to understand and comprehend because we see that we're spending money up front, Dominica's money. But why wasn't a facility created at the aid bank or the credit union or any one of our local financial institutions? A facility created, and we call the truckers together. It's an opportunity to give them to grow or to force them to grow. But why didn't we create a facility? Get the truckers together, say, hey guys, we're going to be spending $1.6 billion. We need 100 and something trucks. Based on the amount of earth movement that we're going to be doing, we need 140 trucks, 160 trucks, 200 trucks. Now, we have X amount of you guys. We're going to put a facility together. We're going to put a facility at the financial institution that we will give you access to. Now, how you will access this? One, get yourselves together. Make sure that you're duly registered. All of your taxes, income tax, social security, all of those things, corporate taxes paid. And go and access the finance. You're accustomed of buying trucks. None of the trucks that you see in Dominica is made here. These guys are accustomed of bringing in trucks. But we need, let's say, for instance, Lofty, we need a different capacity. We need a higher capacity truck. We need a bigger truck. It needs to have this amount of capacity. All right, cool. But you know where to get that. So we're going to give you a facility, access to a facility at the financial institution. Go and get those trucks. We're starting the airport in a year. We're going to start in 6 months. We're going to start in 2 years. Get yourselves together, go to the institution, access the financing, go to Germany, Europe, China, Japan, wherever it is, and get the equipment, get the trucks, and bring them down. One, we could have given them access to duty-free, the same duty-free that the contractor is enjoying now. We could have given them access to an interest-free loan, and we could have allowed them to use their contract of employment at the international airport as a guarantee of repayment of that facility, right? because we know they're going to be working there for 5 to 6 years minimum. That is a sure, steady income. We know they will be able to repay the financing that they got, and allow them to bring down the trucks to ensure that they have employment at the airport. That is an equitable, sustainable way to ensure that the truckers and the trucking industry experience a massive booming growth. We could have done the same thing for heavy equipment operators. Lofty, we have heavy equipment here. None of it is made in Dominica. So it means that they know how to get the trucks. We could allow them to do that and put our people first and allow them to bring in these heavy equipment, bring in the trucks to do all of the earth movement. Okay, let's be fair. Maybe we couldn't do 100% of it, but we could negotiate for 50% of it. That is what an equitable public investment program, people who are managing an equitable, sustainable public investment program would be trying to do to ensure sustainable growth for its citizens. And we don't see that happening. Not even close. We don't even see them lobbying for a certain level of participation for locals. What we see happening is people boasting about 150 employees that we have over there. But it's at the bottom level. That does not provide any kind of sustainable growth for the citizens in your country because it's not profitable. You're giving the people wages. They should be allowed to make some profit too. They should be able to develop some generational wealth too. They should be able to build a house and buy a piece of land and buy another truck and buy another piece of equipment. So, Lofty, when Grenada has a hurricane, or St. Lucia or St. Vincent has a disaster, we can put together as Dominicans and hire 3-4 barges and move over there with heavy equipment and trucks to help our sister island to rebuild. But we cannot do that now because we are on our knees while we're spending $1.6 billion in the northeast of the island. Let's push it further, Lofty. What about our financial institutions? When there's development brewing in a country and you have an investment boom, your financial institutions benefit from it. Why? Because people are expected to participate. So what people do is start investing. And how do you invest? You have to access financing. How many of our institutions have portfolios that are being serviced from proceeds of work being done at the international airport? How many of them? What is the value of portfolios? What is the amount of portfolios that we have at the credit unions and the banks in Dominica that is directly being serviced from proceeds of work being done at the airport? A sustainable development program backed by legislation and policy that is guided by these guiding principles of sustainability and equity and transparency and efficiency allows your financial sector to grow because the citizens are experiencing a certain level of meaningful participation that will allow your financial sector to grow.
Yeah, I am sensing, Mr. Paris, a sense of a feeling of disempowerment, cannot do better, especially from the sector that you just mentioned a while ago, our local truckers here. Because with the airport under construction, as you rightly said, that is, if not the largest project that we'll ever see in Dominica. And our locals, basically, they're just not benefiting the way that they should be benefiting. And when I talk to some of these gentlemen, you know, they said, Lofty boy, we have our loans to pay, we have all this to pay, we have our commitments, but for some reason, we just cannot get to put our hands or even sign a contract to do anything meaningful at that project or the projects.
Exactly.
And what they're seeing, what we are witnessing in Dominica is this sort of demasculating of our men in that regard, whereby foreigners just, you know, come, flourish, take over, and subject our men here to that sort of second class, even third class citizen in their own land. And so I'm asking you now, I know you said about the secrecy that is involved in the procurement act in Dominica and that policy framework in terms of we cannot get information out there sufficient enough to even make statements or what from a factual standpoint. We have to be guesstimating. So the question to you now is, how can our people, for example, let's use the example you use, our men in Dominica, the local truckers, how can they insert themselves now in the picture to demand more?
We have to demand more from the people in charge. We have to demand more from the people in charge. Now, Lofty, I want to be careful with something, right? We have to be careful with the distractions. One of the easiest things for us to do is to blame the Chinese, or to blame foreign contractors, or to blame other people and see it's foreigners that come and take our jobs. That's not true. That's not true. Just like us, the foreign contractors, the overseas contractors have a responsibility to themselves and to look for work, to position themselves, and to ensure that they can grow their business. And that's what they're doing. They don't have a responsibility to us. The people who have a responsibility to us is the people that we've put in government. The people that we've taken our sovereignty and given it to them and asked them, hey, we think that you guys have what it takes to lead us. Now, there's a whole different conversation when it comes onto our electoral process. And I guess we can talk about that in another program. But these are the guys these are the individuals who have a responsibility to us as it relates to the participation that we're getting. Now, what you have happening, Lofty, is that our local truckers and contractors are being asked to fend for themselves. Now, how do you do that in this situation? Because the Chinese have brought down every single truck they needed. They have brought in every single truck, driven it off the port, and parked it in Wesley. They don't need the locals to participate, and they don't have a responsibility to them. And we shouldn't be asking them. We should be demanding it from them. Lofty, this has precedent, If you look at the Bahama Hotel in the Bahamas, constructed a few years ago, there was a similar situation, again, with people from China. And the Contractors Association, the Contractors Association and contractors over there decided it was not going to happen. They had a similar situation with their government, and they said, no, we're not accepting this. And we want a certain percentage of the work to be handled strictly by local, or strictly through local participation. And what they did was that they protested for it. They demanded it. They went to the administration and say, hey, this is not going to work. And simultaneously, they went to the contractors as well and say, hey, this is not going to work. You're not going to bring down all the equipment because we have equipment here. You're not going to bring down all the workers because we have people who have the capacity to participate at that level, and we will get the job done. But we want a certain level of participation. This is the amount we want, and we're going to stand for it until we get it. And I think they were successful. Now I think they were successful. I know, you can research it. I know they were successful in doing that. I think they had the support of the people. The people decided that they were not going to have it, and they were not going to stand for it, and they were going to demand a certain level of participation, come what may. The people decided to take a stand. And not just in the Bahamas. We've seen this around the Caribbean. We've seen this in Jamaica. We've seen this in Africa and other places where people decide to take a stand. I'm not suggesting that we use violence as an alternative, but the first frontier is that our leaders have to answer. We have to hold their feet to the fire and force them to answer. And if they can't help, then we have to help ourselves. But we cannot decide to sit back and accept it and cry, woe is me.
So basically, sir, you're saying that the people themselves involved or affected should be in a position to do something for and on behalf of their situation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it has to be a collective effort, Lofty. It has to be a collective effort, because it can't just be you and I. It has to be a collective effort. It has to be a collective effort with people who are clear-minded as to what we're trying to achieve, with the required outcomes that we want, and decide that we're not going to accept anything less.
True. I'm hearing also the Dominica Grammar School now under construction. I'm hearing some situation there as well. Have you been hearing?
No, Lofty, I have been reading.
Okay.
I'm fortunate enough to have access to the actual figures that are presented in the budget estimates.
All right. So after the break, we're gonna take a break in just a while, Brother Paris. After the break, we'll get down into some details now surrounding the construction of the DGS. We are hearing some things there, and I guess as you said, you got the documents in your hand from a factual standpoint, so you'll be shedding some light on that indeed. So Brother Paris, so far so good.
Absolutely. This is a good conversation.
Would you imagine 1 hour has gone?
But time flies when you're having fun.
And we have not yet started, huh? I know. All right, folks, that is it. We are just about the 7 o'clock mark here. We are speaking with Senator Delbert Paris out of the Marigot constituency for the past hour or so. If you're just tuning in, that is the brother, erudite brother indeed. We have been speaking with him, talking about how we as Dominicans should be much more involved in our country's development indeed. We're going to take a break at this time, and we're going to come back at the back end of that break and take some of your comments and open up the telephone calls for some of your calls indeed. Let's take a break. We'll be right back in just a bit.
Now we're calling on the African National Council. We're calling on the Southwest African People's Organization. Now! And the children cry, freedom. And the petrol rise, freedom. See my people crying for freedom. Freedom. And the children will freedom. And red blood run quick, freedom. See my people crying for freedom. 400 years now we've been working.
Yes, see my people crying for freedom indeed.
Yes, let us have a separate ways.
Says Nasir Fontaine in song.
Wasn't made for just one man. Demand our freedom cause we need a liberation. Hey, freedom of expression. Freedom of speech. Written in the Human Rights of Declaration. So,
folks, the numbers to call, they are floating across your screen as we speak.
Red blood run quick.
If you want to participate, if you want to get your voice into the conversation we're having here.
Freedom. Hear the children cry.
Brother Nasir is talking about freedom indeed, huh? Freedom. But before we get that freedom, we must unite.
We've got to unite. We've got to unite. Come on, people, say we've got to unite. Brother and sister, say we've got to unite. Why can't we unite? Lord, I wanna know now. Why, oh, why, oh, why, oh, why, oh, can't we unite? Lord, why can't we unite? Why, oh, why, oh, why, oh, why, oh, can't we unite? Lord, united we stand, so divided we fall. We must unite. Topple these walls.
Yes, folks, we gotta unite to topple the walls against us, huh?
Divided too long.
Yes, indeed, we are divided much too long.
Unite. If we must be strong. Oh, 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 oh. Every time I look around, I see my people suffer.
All the issues that are affecting us in Dominica.
I seem to feel the pain. Why?
as a result of our disunity. Huh? We can do it, Dominicans. Yes, we can. Let's unite.
Why can't we unite? Black and white. Why, can't we unite?
Let's unite for the greater good of us. My brother, Nasir Fontaine, thank you very much indeed. Folks, if you're just tuning in at this time, you missed an hour already. But we have been speaking to Senator Delbert Paris, expounding on the topic, the all-important topic of the role of Dominicans in Dominica's development. The imperative for that to happen for a better country indeed. Let's get back now to Mr. Paris as we get back to him. Brother Paris, welcome back indeed.
Yes, Lofty.
Yes, indeed. What we're going to do now, as I said, we'll open up the lines for some of the calls. So callers, please feel free now to use those telephone numbers. They're 245-2396 or 615-9470. This is your time now in terms of your engagement with us here, and especially with our guest here, Mr. Delbert Paris, indeed. Let's take a call already coming in here on this line. Caller, yes, good evening to you, Civic Vibes. You're on.
Hi, good evening. Good evening. How are you?
Very, very well. Good evening to you.
Good
Hi,
evening.
Mr. Paris, too. I hope all is well.
Hi, good evening.
Lofty, as usual, great conversation. But I'm just calling to say that unity starts with individuals. And we as a people have to come back to being our brother's keeper for Dominica to be united. I think we have divided ourselves so much with religion, with politics, that we find it hard to reconnect. But people in themselves have to say within themselves, I am going to make a difference between me and my neighbor. And I feel to myself, if we just start by being the example with ourselves, we will eventually reach to that united front. Until that time, we could speak unity, we could preach unity, we could call for it, but unless people individually make to themselves that I am going to make a difference, we will not be unified in Dominica. What great program.
So caller, what you're saying basically, it starts with self, it starts with you.
Nice. It starts with self. It starts with what do I want for Dominica? How do I want to see Dominica?
All right, indeed. Thank you very much for your very poignant comments here. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks for calling.
Okay, good evening.
All right, indeed. Thank you very much. Yes, Brother Paris, would you agree?
Absolutely. It's unity starts with each of us making a collective decision to have the best outcome, not just for me, but for my brother, to ensure that the person standing next to me benefits from whatever we decide to do. A lot of the times people are misguided, and I think we're forced into it very often where we only think about self. Whereas me, myself, and I, and if it doesn't benefit me, then I'm not involved in it. And that is no way to live, because so many other people have died and lived in order for me to be able to sit here today and to stand here today and have the access that I have, and to be able to work in Dominica and to be able to live in peace in Dominica. So my existence should benefit the people that comes after me, whether I know them or not, and whether we agree on everything or not too. I think one of the things that we missed the point on is that for us to work together, that we have to agree on everything. Agreeing does not mean that you're a part of the collective, and disagreeing doesn't mean that you can't be part of the collective. We won't agree on everything, but there's some things that are not up for debate, and that is the survival and sustainable development of every single Dominican. I think we can unite on that.
Yes, indeed. We should unite on that, indeed. We have a comment here just before we go to the figures as it pertains to the Dominica Grammar School. Everson McGlaw is writing here, that's the real issue. That's a fact Sorry, that's the real issue. That's a fact. The problem is an administration problem, as you alluded to earlier. He continues by saying, it's the lack of understanding of the domino effect on the economy.
Absolutely, everything is right. But I don't think that they have a lack of understanding. I just don't think that they have the will to do better or the capacity to do better. Because if they could, they have enough resources to do better. They don't want to. It is not important enough for them to see Dominicans succeeding. And that's why they're not doing better.
So am I to deduce based on what you said, Mr. Paris, it's a system of keeping the people at a certain point, a certain stage, a certain level of poverty, that these same people will always be groveling or coming back begging for crumbs?
Well, I'm not sure if that's what they're doing, but I can tell you, politicians that don't have holistic development at heart like to keep people in a place where they can see them. They like to keep people in a place where they need them. They like to keep people in a place where they're dependent on them because that makes them easier to control. So I'm not sure if that's what this government is doing, but it sure looks like it.
All right. Very, very, very good answer indeed. Gerald Vital writes here, I think the answer to fixing and straightening out this public sector investment program, procurement and administration policies are to have the people who design and draft these procurement policies, bills, and acts to come from non-politically affiliated interested groups with minimal government influence through mandatory regulation enforced. Maybe we need a paradigm shift, he's suggesting.
True. We look at a lot of the ways that these policies are developed. And like I said in the beginning, it can't be done in a vacuum and it can't operate in a vacuum. And in addition to that, it is not a dead document. A policy is something that is supposed to be alive, which means it needs to constantly be reviewed and updated all the time. Yep. And if what we're doing now has not worked, we need to change it, and we need to change it fast. And when we get to that point, based on the way things have changed, if it requires updating again, we need to update it again, because a policy needs to be geared at the lives of people, and people are alive and ever evolving, and that needs to meet their needs. And if it's not meeting their needs, it needs to be changed, or the people who are responsible needs to be changed.
Indeed. And another comment coming in here from Ferdinand Lawrence. There are a number of comments here, but we can only take a few. Ferdinand Lawrence writes, it's free people, meaning people who are liberated, that can set people free. So those that are not hooked under the Roosevelt bondage will have to fight for those who can't. So basically he said, don't expect the liberates who he's suggesting, they're hooked to come in the streets or whatever it is to free other people. Petra Carbon George says, I agree, Mr. Paris, the present government is using psychology on the people to keep them in a dependent stage. Yeah, let me just take another one here before I get back to you. Bernard Aline writes, their emphasis has been on themselves for too long, and so now they have no option in their minds but to continue with this behavior for fear of exposing themselves to accountability under the law and the consequences which come with that. He says here, by ending, they know very well what they are doing.
Sure. One thing I want to touch on, Lofty. Again, some of these things are meant for distractions, and sometimes we fall into them inadvertently. There's no difference between us and labor rights. There's no difference.
We are Dominicans.
I don't see a difference, right? People choose to follow what they follow, and sometimes we make mistakes and we can be honest, right? But one of the things that we must not fall into the trap of is reinforcing separations between ourselves. We cannot insult and inspire at the same time. And often we have fallen into the trap of doing that.
Repeat that. I love that. We cannot inspire and what?
We cannot insult and inspire at the same time.
I think we can end the program there.
You can't insult and inspire at the same time.
No, what I was saying, that is so punchy. I think we can end the program now. Because we have been on that track for some time, trying to insight and also doing some
we can't insult people,
insult at the same time.
call them all manner of names and expect them to be part of the change that we want to see. If we want to inspire people, we have to show them why. And we have to stay on the trajectory of unifying people and inspiring them.
Yeah.
So I don't see the difference between Laborites and myself. We're all Dominicans, and we have to stay on that trajectory. Lofty, I'm sure you have Laborite friends and colleagues and family members and all of those things. They are enduring the same things that we're enduring. They are some of the people who I talk to on a daily basis. I have Laborite friends, I have Laborite families, colleagues, all of them. That's the party they have chosen to support, and they have a right to do so. But your choice and the people you decide to support and pledge allegiance to has nothing to do with the truth. The truth doesn't care about your allegiance. The truth cares about the result. And at the end of the day, when life is better in Dominica, it will not be better for one group of people. It will be better for everybody. When life is better in Dominica, when people are able to grow sustainably in Dominica, all of our children will be able to go to university, not because of a handout or because they pledged allegiance to something, but because they deserve to. And when they're finished with university, they will be able to see a future in Dominica. Not one set of children, all of them. Not one set of young people, all of them. When they try to establish a business in Dominica, because life is sustainable in Dominica, because we can see a future in Dominica, all of our children will be able to start businesses and grow them here out of merit and hard work and the sweat of their brow. So let's stay on the trajectory of inspiring people, and let's not fall back into the trap, because we've done it before and it didn't work. Let's not fall back into the trap of trying to insult and inspire at the same time, because it doesn't work. Let's stick on the trajectory of inspiring, speaking truth to power, and always ensuring that whatever we do, our efforts must be to bring people together, because at the end of the day, the result is for all of us, not just some of us.
True. That thing is so powerful indeed. And I just wanted to sort of expound on it a little before we go to the Figures Ready Grammar School. When you hear, and I am saying now, politicians talk, some people who don't have the interests of country and its people at heart, that sort of speech comes out.
Right.
They always tend to divide people by calling them a particular name. So whatever right you are, whatever denomination you belong to, whatever sect you belong to. And so obviously once they classify people in different groups, different subgroups, that is where that sort of, a subliminal aligning or maligning comes around. Right. And people will push back. People will tend to always, push back at, oh, that person doesn't like me. This group doesn't like my group, and that is where we are. That is where we have been for some time. And what you said, brother, it is so powerful in that we really cannot insult people and try to inspire them at the same time. And it is just what it is. And I think, as I said in my preamble, with people like you, Delbert, in Parliament, speaking that kind of Dominican language now, not looking at Dominicans in any, groupings, whatever right we are, then I think once that message goes forth, then we will start to build a better Dominica. That will be ingrained in the psyche now, even our young people coming up.
Absolutely.
And we may not see it, but the work has started and it will bear fruits. So I want to thank you.
I hope so, because the intention, Lofty, and is to bring balance and to inspire and to speak for people who don't have a voice. And the people who don't have a voice, they don't have a color. Vulnerable people don't have a color. Less disadvantaged people don't have a color. They are just that. They're disadvantaged. Yeah. And if we're speaking on behalf of the youth, we're speaking on behalf of disadvantaged people, we have to speak unity and we have to speak for all of us, not just some of us.
Yeah, there should be no segregation.
Let's talk about the grammar school for a bit.
Sure. Go right on.
Exciting. It's an exciting. area that sort of explains of what is going on in Dominica, because we have history and we have data, or a bit of data, that does not necessarily answer all the questions, but it shows you that there is something worth paying attention to. Last year, we in the budget allocations for the grammar school, for the continuation of works or to meet expenses related to the grammar school, there was a $5 million allocation. Bear in mind, this is an ongoing project. It is an ongoing project. At that time, I can't remember exactly what was already spent, but we had gone north of $22 million already, right? $5 million allocated to meet expenses. What has happened in this year, Lofty, is in addition to that $5 million, we have spent $21.3 million, ended up at $26.3 million spent on an ongoing project. Now, in the budget estimates, what you have is a forecasted view of what the total expenditure in this line item is expected to have. And we're looking to end up close to $80 million. I think north of $76 or $77 million for this particular project. Now, by all intents and purposes, it is very difficult to see how that project could cost all of that money. It's difficult because what is on the ground does not reflect that amount of money. And again, if there was a transparent process where we could see what those items are, maybe somebody could explain it, but I don't think that exists. But here's where the question becomes a little more tricky. The existing two wings, which is supposed to be, according to them, and I want to be fair, it is supposed to be rehabilitated. I think they're doing some painting. They're looking at the bathrooms. They're going to be rehabilitating some windows and doors, etc. But the structure is fine. Those two wings, at the time it was constructed a few years ago, was constructed in the region of about $5.5 million. Bear in mind that that was done by a local contractor, right?
Yeah.
There was a global plan that included the sections of work that is being constructed now. And there was a forecasted or an estimated cost of about, let's say, $25 million. Right? So in all, you'd be looking at about north of $30 million for the construction, including the playing field and I think some other amenities that are going to be there, right? So you're looking at north of $30 million. Obviously, Lofty, they're going to ask us to add the inflation. They're going to ask us to add the increase in material. They're going to ask us to add the increase in labor cost. It just does not add up. $80 million for what is going on at the grounds of the grammar school seems to be overshot by far. And here's the thing. I raised it in Parliament with the hope that the ministers responsible would at least take the opportunity to say, hey, this is what we're experiencing. This is what we priced. This is the challenges that we had. This is where the large chunks of money came from, why you see that jump or that exorbitant figure. Firstly, in 1 year, because after you're telling me that you're looking at your projections and you're saying, okay, this year we're expecting to spend $5 million. And you end up at 26. What did you miss? What is it that you missed? This is an ongoing project. It's not to say that you were in the foundation and you encountered a river that you had to divert in the foundation. That was not a hurricane year. What is it that you experienced that caused you to spend over 500% of what you budgeted for in that particular area? And I expected someone to take up the challenge and say, hey, this is what happened. This is what happened. And that's why you're seeing such an increase. So, Lofty, the question is not answered, but the question now becomes it's a more prominent question because now, why isn't anybody answering these questions?
So absolutely no reasonable answers were given.
Not even unreasonable. No answer. Nobody decided to take that on. Nobody was able to explain why that is so.
So let's go over the figures again. We're talking about 30 million tops, you say.
Let's say 35.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say 35. And this is research that you can do on the ground. The last tender when the existing wings were done was a public tender. I think it was done to the government. The Ministry of Education and the Public Works Department would have had those documents. Of course, there's a local contractor that was chief in doing those first two wings. And you can do that research on the ground and find out, hey, what was it like? How long ago was it? Can we add the inflation? Let's see, what was the we can find that.
Yeah.
Do the research. And then we can look at the document. By now, the estimate should be published online. We can look at the estimates. It's public documents. And we can go through the figures and we can ask the questions. Here's what we should be relying on now. There should be an audit report from the audit department that looks at this area to tell us what's going on. There should be an audit report that says, hey, this is fine because we looked at it, the contractor was paid on time, this is the challenges, et cetera, but everything is fine in this area, we have no questions. But we haven't seen that audit report yet. There should have been one placed on the table in Parliament during the budget period, I think, but it was not there. So we're still waiting for this year's audit report. That should be something that we should see coming out of the audit report. Where is that money coming from? Where is that money going to? And why such a vast difference from year to year? And why are we looking at a forecasted figure of that enormous amount? It doesn't seem to add up if you're adding all of the variables that should give you a massive increase in price. It still doesn't take us to that. So the question is there. Hopefully, I don't want to make any assumptions and I can't see that it's going anywhere, but I'm saying that is a problem that needs to be explained because it's too much of it's an exorbitant amount. Now, if you juxtapose that against other ministries like the productive sectors in agriculture and in tourism and in youth and sports, where you had massive underspending. How do we explain that? How is it that we have money that we can throw at the wall in one area or in a group of areas, but in other areas we're expecting, like we mentioned earlier on, in terms of expecting reasonable, transparent returns, we're seeing massive underspending. How are we? And that's where the transparency and the accountability it comes into question again.
Yeah.
Because now you have to juxtapose that and explain that. Why is that happening? How are we able to spend money exorbitantly in one area or in a group of areas, but in these areas where it touches a greater amount of people, it reaches the masses and you're expecting tangible results and tangible returns from them, we're not seeing that type of spending. In fact, we're seeing massive underspending. Take, for example, the Ministry of Youth and Sports and Culture. You had 21 individual items of areas to spend on youth, sports, and culture. $25 million allocated and approved for the sector. You only had spending on 2 items. All right, 19 of those items, you had absolutely no spending, 0. Absolutely no spending. Now, I'd like to be careful to say that this is not my figures. This is the government's documents. This is the government's calculations. They're the ones saying that they didn't spend any money there. They're the ones saying that this was allocated and we spent $0 here. Out of $25 million, you only spent $925. Now, what was the challenge? What could have happened in this area that caused you not to spend the money? Wasn't the money available? Did you have challenges spending the money? But how is it that we having challenges spending the money here, but we don't have those challenges spending that type of money over there? How? explain that. I can't explain it. I can raise the question, but the minister is responsible and the accounting officer is responsible should have a handle on it and be able to explain it. And that is the kind of questions that Dominican should be asking and raising, because you see, Lofty, and this is why I'm a stickler for sticking to the point and bringing clarity to the issues, because that is not a red or a blue issue. That is a Dominican issue, because Dominican young people are not red or blue. They're Dominican. And when you don't spend the money to facilitate their growth in youth and sports and culture, you affect every single one of them. Those are the people who are affected. It doesn't have a color anymore. When you don't spend the money in tourism, when over 90% of the money that you spent, stand corrected, I can look at the figure now, in the tourism ministry is on the extension of the Douglas Childs runway that at the time was incomplete. Everybody's affected. What about the vendors? What about the vendors arcade? What about the enhancement of the sites? What about those things that have real tangible results for the everyday man? How are we having challenges here, but in those areas, we don't have any challenges at all? These are the kind of issues that we're expecting to have public debate on and ask our leaders for explanations and transparent, accountable responses regarding those areas, not coming to Parliament and campaigning and talking about things that are not budgeted for, talking about things that happened 25 years ago and 20 years ago, and talking about things you're going to do in 2030, but you have nothing to say about documents that we're looking at right now and approving right now. Is an insult to the people of Dominica, because Dominica have intelligent people. Dominicans are intelligent people who can understand and make decisions for themselves if you give them the right information. I think these kinds of discussions help because it's getting people to understand what you're hearing and what you're seeing doesn't add up. And we should have enough discipline to stick to the issues, stop fighting one another, stick to the issues, and hold our government accountable.
Indeed. Comment first and a question from someone via WhatsApp message. This person writes, "Good evening, Patriots," and that is Arundel Thomas speaking here. "I'm listening. So if the director of audit is unable to get credible data/information from the various government subsectors, how can they verify the cost of government programs?" That is the first question. The next is, how can we give serious consideration to any of the conclusions of the IMF or such other agencies? He ends by saying, "This is a sham regime. For Dominica to grow, Roosevelt must go." He adds here, "Articulate, intelligent, and astute presentation by Senator Delbert Paris. No BS, nonsense about BB, rum, and ice cream, blah, blah, blah. It's all about productive conversations for Dominica." So that is from Arundel Thomas listening to the program at this time. Yeah?
Very good questions. Very good questions.
Yeah. And another question someone is asking, ask Mr. Paris if he could revisit the numbers, really, Dominica Grammar School again for me, please.
Right. What I can give you is what was budgeted last year.
Yeah.
So you had $5 million budgeted to meet the expenses for the grammar school last year. And we in the revised estimates this year, and the revised means almost actual what we actually spent.
Yeah.
Was $26.3 million. All the rest of the numbers that you heard me talk about was the research that I was able to do on the ground, finding out the cost of the other two wings that exist right now. And that was in the region of about $5.5 million.
Wow. Okay. Indeed. To Arundel's point, thank you very much for the clarification, really person's question. To Arundel's point, really unavailability to access credible information where the audit is concerned now. What is your take on that?
That's a good question. I have the same question myself, because if the audit department is responsible for the checks and balances.
Yeah.
And if they cannot, because Lofty, I challenge you, pick up, you can, and it's published online as well. It's public document, you can find it. The last one that was published sometime last year around this time, you can pick it up and just read through it, and you will see certain sections talking about the audit department trying to get information, and the information was not made available. I see it pop up several times in the audit report, and I'm saying, so what happens now? If they don't get the information, what happens then? I'm sure that the law provides for something to happen. And if it doesn't happen, then what are the people of Dominica left with? So the gentleman is asking a very good question. What happens if the audit department can't get the accurate information?
Okay, just stretching the conversation a bit. What about the permanent secretaries in terms of their ministries and they being the accounting officers now and have to give account as to what happened under the ministries?
Well, they're responsible, and I think that's who they would be one of the primary people or primary persons that the audit department would be in contact and in communication with. And they would be, well, according to law, the accounting officer is a responsible individual. Yes. In some cases, they have more responsibility than the minister himself. So the accounting officers are responsible, and the law speaks to their level of accountability that they should have. So definitely the permanent secretaries in the various ministries would have a certain level of responsibility in terms of providing information, not just to the audit department, but to documents, the public documents that we see.
Yeah, indeed. Let me just see if I can get to some comments. Folks, it is already 27 minutes, 8 o'clock. We are slowly but surely getting to the end of the program. Indeed, let me see if I could get some comments here before we move on here. Val D is writing here. When was the last audit reconstruction of the DGS? Do you have that information?
No, I don't have that information.
No. Okay. Let me see if I could get some pressing comments here before we re-engage here.
What I've been able to deduce regarding the construction of the grammar school is what was presented in the estimates for 2024, 2025. And just going through it, seeing the figures, it stood out for me, and I decided to do some more research into what was going on, and that's why I was able to raise the question. The question still exists because nobody thought it was important enough to bring some clarity to the issue in a sensible way. Nobody thought that was, none of the ministers decided to take it up. So that's what we got with.
Well, Brother Paris, you're a senator in parliament. I know there are certain areas you may not want to go. I know you're a man of integrity. But some of what you're saying there, and I'm speaking from the ordinary common man standpoint now, in that you may not say that the money is missing, they are elsewhere, go somewhere else. It seems as if the government's money they have legs. My money, your money, when we put them in our pockets, it's supposed to stay there. But it seems as if mysteriously the government's own or the people's own, right. They grow legs mysteriously, and monies that are supposed to be allocated for certain sectors are not there, as you alluded to earlier, and other sectors are, asking for more money. So something is happening there that the people of Dominica need much more, clarified / factual information on. So I would want to agree with you in terms of you posing and probing and doing whatever you can at, that highest level, and hoping that answers be given.
Absolutely. And it goes back to accountability and transparency, and it goes back to equity, and it goes back to sustainability, Lofty, those guiding principles upon which our public investment policy should be based. And the fact that we have so many questions, even during an important process like approving the annual budget, the fact that you have so many questions, I mean, we don't have time to go through all the questions. It's 429 pages of budget documents, right? And one of the things that needs to be clear, the budget presentation is not the actual estimates. And you're not approving. So what you hear us debating is not what the Minister of Finance said. It's what's presented in the document, because the Minister of Finance can say anything.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, he said a few things that I challenged him on regarding things that he said they were going to do that were not provided for in the estimates. The estimates is what you're approving. And the estimates, you hear them come back and shoot the estimates down and say, oh, it's an estimate. You can't expect to see all the figures. You put 429 pages and they don't have everything. Well, then you should have put 600. So let's see everything and have an opportunity to discuss it properly. Because this is not a shop. This is people's lives that you're talking about. This will affect how people live their life in Dominica and how they will be affected, because it cuts across all of the sectors. The healthcare sector, the tourism sector, our agricultural sector. And you hear lots of nice things. And if you're not paying attention, it looks and sounds really good. But when you get down to the weeds of it, you realize it can't be, it's not backed up by actual financial allocations. And even when they say they're going to spend stuff on that, even when they say they're going to be a level of implementation in that particular area, it's not done. And the question is why? And if for 24 years we've been having the same type of activity, it means we need to do something about it.
We need to change. We need to change the approach. Yeah.
We need to do something about it.
Yeah. And as we're on that point there, let us see if we can spend the last 25 minutes of the program to sort of, help empower, help inspire, as you said a while ago, put that level of hope or inject that level of hope in Dominicans that something good can come out of our country, something good can be made of or salvage what is left of our country. In terms of a brighter outlook for Dominica, apart from all the talk, how would you, Brother Paris, encourage Dominicans to continue in trying to, get Dominica to be the best it can be?
First of all, is to inform ourselves. We have to decide what we want as a country. We have to decide what we want as a country. Dominica has, let's use TLR4 as an example.
Yeah.
Dominica has people who will grab themselves and pull themselves up out of the mud by their bootstraps and go and get the job done. And this is why I believe that the only way for us to succeed is when the best of us get the opportunity to lead the rest of us. When the people who have true ethical, sustainable development at heart and have the capacity to see it through, when those people get into office and we put those people into leadership, that's the time we'll start to see it through. We have plenty of options. And I think Dominicans have been patient, and they have looked for ethical, sustainable, passive, peaceful means of raising questions. One of the things that you see happening, Lofty, and you said it at the beginning of the program, that you yourself stop listening to Parliament because there is such an inundation of garbage that it becomes difficult to listen to. And it's hard to listen to because the people you're expecting to address issues, real issues, they don't. We're all over the place talking about a bunch of things that doesn't change the lives of Dominican people. We have to hold them responsible and ask them to stop. But it has to be all of us. Some of us can't be passive and saying, oh, and we cannot be celebrating the things that we don't like. We cannot be celebrating the things that help to make us poor. We have to celebrate the things that make us better as a people. People sometimes congratulate me and for standing and for sacrificing and all of those things. And I say to people all the time, there are so many more people who are better than me, born and bred Dominicans that have the capacity to put themselves forward. But Lofty, if we always sacrifice people and we always take the opportunity to criticize them as soon as they start making a contribution, they have options and they will, and they have left. What we have to do is be serious about actually developing ourselves as a people and be serious about the future that we want our young people to have. Be serious about the future that we want our young people to have. And when we start raising our voices independently, like one of your callers mentioned, independently and individually, when we start raising our voices and saying, hey, I want better for my son, for my daughter, for me as an individual. We have the capacity to do better here, here, and here. And this is what I want to see. And when more of us start supporting each other to do that, the change will start to organically happen. I know a lot of people call for protests, and I know a lot of people call for demonstrations and so on, so on, so. And maybe that has its place, but there has to be a level of clarity. There has to be, what do we do after we protest? Who is going to lead after we protest? What's going to happen on day one? We need to have that level of clarity. And I think once that starts to organically happen, and we start to put ourselves in a frame of mind where we know what we want for our country, we know what we want for our young people. We have collectively decided that we want a better future for our young people, for the seniors. We want the people who have retired and are not able to work anymore, whether it be in the private sector or the public sector. We know the kind of life that we would like to see them live in their twilight years. When we have decided what that is as a collective, the change will happen organically. I'm not speaking against protest. Protest has its place, but you can't protest because you're angry. You have to protest because you're smart and because you have a plan, because you know what happens on day one and day two after the protest. It's not just about being angry and getting involved in violence and burning down the city. That doesn't help you. We have to be smart about it. We have to be strategic about it. So before we get there, Lofty, we have to have a collective conversation about how we want to see Dominica tomorrow, what we want to have in Dominica tomorrow. And when we have decided what that is, organically, you'll start to see the change happening in Dominica.
Indeed, very, very well said indeed. Brother Peter Carbon, he wrote here on the live feed, unless you're able to use the vote, and as you said, the electoral process is another conversation maybe want to have, but he says here, unless you're able to use the vote to hold your parliamentarians to account, they will continue to disregard the rule of law, okay? Adelaide Joseph wrote here, I do not listen to Parliament. When I did listen, it was hard to believe that these are the people with degrees. But then again, there are degrees and degrees, quote unquote, a bunch of uncultured, shameless, and bought people. That person writes. Val D writes here, sorry, money seems to be vanishing like Houdini's magic. The people need to be asking what happened to their dollars, to their money. Let me see if I get one more point here before we get back to you. Change begins with me, says Joan Bellot, basically summarizing the point that you made a while ago in terms of that sacrifice that everyone needs to bring to the table in order for that collective to benefit.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Another point, just before you come back in here, Arundel Thomas writes here, thank you for sharing my sentiments. Clearly, this conversation, we can confirm that this Roosevelt regime does not care to give Dominicans an account of anything. They have become so arrogantly incompetent, he writes, and uncaring. They have become abusive. We are hearing the state of resources and Chinese labor are being used for the private purpose of Roosevelt. That is a hearing, as he said here, what a shame. How much longer should citizens take? He ends by saying, good job, Lofty. I notice you are in solidarity combat tonight. Good for you. Arundel will have that conversation when I'm off here, all right? In that solitary combat mode. You said I'm in tonight. But thank you nonetheless, Arundel, for your eyes and ears each and every time and your comments indeed. Yes, we have 15 more minutes to go, brother Paris, in terms of your sort of, pulling everything together. How would you bring down the curtains?
Several ways, Lofty, but we've said a lot of it. There's one area I want to touch on before we wrap this all up. You heard the Minister of Finance talk about the cannabis industry and what they're planning to do with the cannabis industry. Is something it's something that I'm interested in, because there is, not just personally, but as part of the collective, we've seen what the world has done with cannabis. marijuana. We've seen what the world has done with it. I remember listening to Lennox Linton, former opposition leader, give his, back then I used to listen to Parliament as well. And that's one of the presentations that I listened to. I listened to that presentation where he tried to break down and demonstrate a full-scale implementation program that Dominica could implement regarding the development of a medical marijuana industry. And he was practically laughed at, Lofty.
Yeah, I remember.
He was practically laughed at. And I mean, back in those days where you had the ministers that would say so many things and ridiculed him for the idea. And now you're hearing the Minister of Finance coming to talk about the development of a medical marijuana industry, a medical cannabis industry, and the authority that they're planning to put together to develop the industry. And I'm saying, one, we've missed the boat, and we're still sitting on the shorelines waiting for something to drop from the heavens for us to start developing. And that's the kind of opportunity, the missed opportunity that I keep seeing us having in Dominica, because that's something we could do for ourselves. Instead, we had a certain level of decriminalization for marijuana that allowed it to become more commonplace, but not enough for us to capitalize and make money from. And that is a problem. And that is a lack of foresight and vision that I've seen happening in this government for a long time. We took the opportunity to decriminalize a certain amount, but that certain amount, Lofty, is just for recreational use, just for smoking, just for having as a plaything, rather than putting in place at the time a serious effort in towards the development of the medical marijuana industry that would give us, as part of our agricultural program, that would give us the avenue to develop an industry, not for smoking and not for playing and not for making commonplace, but for developing a real industry from. We're missing the boat, and we're still playing around with it, because even after the minister talked about it, we look for it, and the provisions made for it, there's no provisions. There's no monetary allocations for it in the budget. And I'm saying this is one of the things. These are some of the areas that we can ensure that we can put individual Dominicans, independent Dominicans, red, blue, white, whatever color. We can help to put them in place for sustainable development. Not for drug use and for ensuring that we dumb down our people, but for helping to lift our people up independently, because people with land can apply for a license and it can be monitored properly and done in a sustainable, equitable, transparent way, so that we can participate in one of the fastest growing industries in the world. There's a flip side to it too, Lofty, that I took the time to mention in Parliament. We also have to look at expunging the records of young people and old people who have been involved and charged and who have criminal records for the sale and distribution of marijuana. Because we can't be thinking of developing an industry for us and our friends now, while they're still young people and still people who are in the military and probably still persons in prison for the same thing that we're trying to capitalize on now. There must be some equity involved. There must be transparency involved. And we have to free those people from those kinds of things, because they're being held back. And us and our friends have greenhouses that we're going to put together and temperature control with lights and all sort of things to grow the same marijuana that we have people in prison for. It's not humane. And that is something that is a way that we can get our young people involved. And speaking about our young people, Lofty, one of the things that I don't hear our ministers talking about, I listened for it because I was out of time. I didn't have time to plug it in. We are developing an international airport. I even heard one minister talking about wanting all of the jobs, in every job at the airport, that he would have somebody from his constituency. But Lofty, I'm not hearing about any scholarships where we're sending our students to study in order to help them to develop careers associated with positions at the international airport. So by the time it's completed, they will already be behind. Are we promoting and pushing our young people to go and get qualified and experience in those kinds of careers and those kinds of competencies and positions to ensure that when we open the airport, we have somebody that we can place in a position that is from Dominica, qualified with Dominican money, trained maybe outside as we always do, because that's what has to happen, but who can come back with the surety that, hey, you're a number one candidate, or you're one of the candidates we're looking at because we've given you the opportunity to get qualified to serve your country in a historic way at the international airport. Lofty, our money as a country, our resources as a country must be geared towards developing our most important resource. Your most important resource is people. Your most important resource that you have is
I agree.
people. And if the resources that you have, if the investments that you're making, if the money that you're spending, if the policies that you're developing and the legislature that you're implementing is not geared towards the development of people, you have missed the mark. You need to go back and start again. Or maybe you're not the person for the job, because it has to be people-centered, not color-centered, not religion-centered, people-centered. We will not always agree on everything, but we can agree that our people must come first. Our people have to come first. For 25 years, we've seen that our people are not coming first. We're second-class citizens in our own country, and we're constantly being asked to fend for ourselves. And the minute we complain, the same people come back and bash people and say that we're ungrateful and that we should be thankful. But it's not right. Our people must come first, and whatever we do, however we do it, must be people-centered first, and it must not be under pretense. You talk about the houses that have been given to the people and the apartments that have been given to the people, and we boast about it, but yet still we're holding them prisoner because we're not giving them the titles. We refuse to give them the titles. Just like how we could change the law, we could come to Parliament and change the law to ensure that people who are bringing down planes here would get it duty-free and get the VAT waivers. We can change the law to ensure that we give the people strata titles and give the people the titles for their house so that they can have that peace of mind. We have to be truly people-centered. And until people realize that, people on both sides of the aisle, people on both sides of the issue, until we realize that. At the time we realize that, then is when we begin to change organically. Then is when you'll see a complete shift in our mindset and the paradigm. You see a light bulb go on and things will start to change in Dominica.
What a powerful, powerful statement indeed. Someone is asking you, someone wants to put you on the spot. Brother Margel Durand, ask Mr. Paris for me, he writes, if he has any plans of running for electoral office, because he says we need people like him in Parliament.
I can't say that yet. I can't say that yet, but here's what I've learned, and I've always been schooled this way. This was how I was raised.
Mm-hmm.
You can only function, you can only see success at your place of assignment. Okay. You can only see success at your place of assignment. And if that's where God wants me, and if that's where the people decide I should be, I don't have a choice in the matter.
Very, very well, eloquently answered, I must say. Zoro Zimpampo writes here, brother, I am very impressed with your line of reasoning and articulation.
Thank you.
Let me just see. I think I had some more comments here, but the time is slowly but surely slipping away. In terms of your final comments, brother Paris, before you leave us here, anything that you just want to drive home or concretize before you leave, just solidify 1 or 2 points based on the topic of conversation we had tonight.
Really, 2 things.
People,
we can go through details from now until kingdom come, but 2 things we must remember. I didn't intend to say it, but it came out organically. one, you cannot insult and inspire at the same time. There's a
Yep.
lot of talk about what we should be doing. And you find people even on social media, they call the radio station, and we're constantly at loggerheads. And we're not recognizing that the same people that we want to be part of the proverbial resistance or the group for change, that we're insulting them by calling them names and demeaning them. And we're taking the same line of reasoning as the oppressor. We can't do that. You can't insult and inspire at the same time. And the second thing.
So just to ask a question in that line of reasoning, which is very profound, how would you go about now chastising or rebuking someone who is doing some things that are against the country's development in that regard, for want of a better term? By not insulting them.
Give me some more specifics. Give me some more specifics.
Okay. For example, we have people who support the Labour Party. I'll be straight up with you.
For sure.
If you tell somebody about some of the things that you mentioned that United about transparency and accountability, they'll tell you, but for example, let me give you an example that I had with a teacher in Dominica. I had a conversation many moons ago with a teacher. And a teacher is someone who's supposed to be affecting lives, especially young lives, in a positive manner. Absolutely. That teacher and I were having a political conversation. And in conversation, the brother said to me, Lofty, if Roosevelt's carrot goes to Libya, that time Gaddafi was alive, and gets $3 million, that teacher then, still is today, doesn't see any reason or has no objection with Roosevelt taking $1 million for himself, pocketing $1 million for himself and giving the country too. So how would you, Mr. Paris, talk to or rebuke or chastise someone like that in terms of the reasoning that is anti-development?
Here's what I've learned, Lofty. And this is it's not common. You have to be able to chastise someone and leave them with their dignity. You have to be, it's something we have to practice, but we have to be able to chastise people and leave them with their dignity. He is wrong because that is corruption and that is theft. And you have to explain it to him in the clearest way that you can, in the most transparent way that you can. But we have to stop it there. You can't proceed to call him a thief. You can't proceed to call the teacher all sorts of derogatory names because you're solidifying him in his position.
Okay.
After you chastise somebody, you have to give them room to change their mind. You have to give him room to change his mind. You have to show him what is wrong and give him room to change his mind. You have to give, because oftentimes we do this, we chastise people and there's no room for them to change their mind and say, okay, Lofty, I was wrong. And I see what you say and I see the point. But we beat them so badly that the only option they have is to double down on the foolishness and stand firm on the corruption that they was trying to promote. He's wrong and he knows that he's wrong. He knows it, but he doesn't see a way for him to change his mind and he's too ashamed of it. And we have to be tolerant of people, Lofty. You have to understand the type of fear that some of the people go through, why they side with the things that they know to be wrong. You have to understand it's a fair response. They are scared out of their mind because they don't see another way out. And they figure is wrong already. I might as well be wrong and strong. But you have to chastise them. You have to correct them. You have to educate them, but also give them some room to change their mind because they will change their mind. The second thing that I wanted to say is that, and I will use the same teacher, for example, when things become better in Dominica, he should see a space there for him as well. He should see a space there for him as well. In the new Dominica, in the better Dominica, in the transparent Dominica, in the accountable Dominica, in the sustainable Dominica, people who support the Labour Party must see a space for themselves as well. They must not see that the tables will turn and them and their children will be public enemy. They must not see themselves that way. We must not purport it to be a Dominica that will exclude them. That's not right. It wouldn't be right either. They must have a future in Dominica too, because Dominica will change in all of it. Because a lot of the times what we think is that it is up to us, but there's a God above, and in due time, he will make the changes. We have to get ready for it. We have to be prepared for it. And that's why I mentioned earlier on, we have to know what happens on day one.
True.
After the change, we have to be prepared for it. Sometimes we don't get the blessings that we are asking for because we're not prepared to handle it. God see that if he give us a blessing that we're asking for, that it will kill us rather than help to uplift us. We have to get prepared to live in a new Dominica, to live in a better Dominica. And my friends and colleagues who are supporters of the government now must see themselves having a place in the new Dominica as well. When they start to see that, and when we, the people who have the foresight and the vision to see and understand and require and promote for a new Dominica, when we see that labor rights and people who disagree with us, when we understand that they have a place and a future for them, and we start making accommodations for them too, things will start to change. God will see that we're ready for the blessing that we're asking for, and he will give it to us.
Senator Delbert Paris, thank you very, very much indeed, my brother.
Absolutely.
I enjoyed every minute that
Absolutely.
we spent here tonight in terms of that, casual discussion, but very, very pertinent information as it pertains to our country's development. I want to thank you profusely for taking time off your Sunday evening and just being here with us in terms of sharing of that very, very valuable information to country. Yeah. Your final comments before we basically say goodnight.
Lofty, thank you very much for having me. I enjoyed being here as well. This conversation could go on for 4 hours. It's something that I love to talk about. It's something that makes me very hopeful because I know Dominica will be better. It's not gonna come with all sunshine and blue skies. There's gonna be some tough days. There's gonna be some days where we're gonna have to put our hand to the plow and get the job done. But it will be worth it. And Dominica will be a better place for every single one of us and our children. And we will remember the days when things were hard. We'll remember the days, the dark days when things happened and we didn't know what was happening, and transparency and accountability will be a thing of the past. I look forward to living in a bright new Dominica, with every one of us having a future and a space, and all our children succeeding and having a future and being able to express their dreams and their truest potential in the country of their birth and of their heritage. I think that is what God wants for us, and I want to be on the side of history that work towards making that happen. Thank you for having me, Lofty. I'll be back sometime soon, I hope.
Very, very much indeed. Thank you very much. What an optimistic way to end tonight's conversation. Brother Delbert Paris, enjoy what is left of your evening.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll be in touch.
Indeed, indeed.
I know we have done it before, so we can do it again. All the pain we've endured, but pride we have to maintain in order to create a better world. Every living soul has to play their role. We have an opportunity to change things around, an opportunity to change things, an opportunity to make Dominica strong.
An opportunity to change things around, an opportunity to make our country strong. Thank you, Joyce Stout, saying that exactly in song.
Make Dominica strong.
Folks, that is it. It's 8 o'clock and we got to wind down things here.
Jealousy, not by me, certainly. We got to.
Just to give you guys a sneak peek as to next week's conversation, most likely, yes, that is the operating words here, most likely.
Tomorrow is the first day. The rest of our life.
We'll be talking to a political scientist out of Nigeria.
We have an opportunity.
Maybe two, yes, maybe two as well.
An opportunity to make our country strong.
So be in tune next week, Sunday from 6 o'clock. Civic Vibes is the place to be.
Change.
Thank you, Senator Brother Delbert Paris. Indeed, 2 hours well spent.
I remember the love and unity that we once shared. Starting from the home, the children would be prepared.
I saw a quote from Karen Joseph from Patrick Henry,
Part of our children,
one of the founding fathers of the United States of America.
think we grow and grow every.
That is how I want to wind down and end tonight's conversation.
People were real discreet.
Karen Joseph writes, the liberties of a people never were, nor never will be secure when the transactions of the rulers may be concealed from them. Quote from Mr. Patrick Henry.
To make Dominica strong, we have an opportunity to change things around, an opportunity to change things, an opportunity to make Dominica strong. We got to stamp out the ugly, stamp out cruelty, jealousy, not by we, certainly.
That is how we do it on Civic Vibes. We keep the conversation at a certain level in the interest of our country and our fellow men.
Tomorrow is the first day.
Again, thank you, Mr. Senator Delbert Paris.
The first day of the rest of our life.
And all of you, yes, who were tuned in tonight.
An opportunity to change things, an opportunity to make our country strong.
It's because of you, Civic Vibes is the program that it is. So see you guys next week Sunday, same time, same place. Bye-bye. I love you.
Grandma used to say that laziness is a real crime. It captivates your body, then retards your mind. As a people, we have to change this old attitude and give our country all the love we really should. Instead, we sit and we criticize, where we say let's now analyze and give young people no scope in difficult times just how to cope. It's us to build them the foundation in order to build a stronger, vibrant nation. We have an opportunity to change things around, an opportunity to change things, an opportunity to make Dominica strong. We have an opportunity to change things around, an opportunity to change things, an opportunity to make Dominica strong. We got to stamp out crookedness, stamp out all slackness, jealousy, not by we, certainly. We got to stamp out the negative, what's unproductive, treachery, not by we, certainly. Tomorrow is the first day, the rest of our lives. Let's make tomorrow the first day of the rest of our lives. We have an opportunity to change things around, an opportunity to change things, an opportunity